Hey everybody, it's Drags. It's Wednesday, January 2nd. Happy New Year. Happy 2019. It's time for episode 278 of Patriots Beat on the CLNS Media Network. Find us at clnsmedia.com and of course follow us on Twitter at Patriots CLNS. The Patriots finished up the regular season in great form on Sunday at Gillette Stadium in a 38-3 thrashing of the lowly Jets. They clinched a first-round bye for a 9th straight season. Their defense, featuring Trey Flowers, Malcolm Brown, and Adam Butler, really showed up and appear ready to pick up their collective game come playoffs. But most of all, and I think every Patriot fan feels this way, Tom Brady looked like, well, Tom Brady again on Sunday, completing 13 of his first 15 passes on the day. 4 touchdowns in all, 3 of those coming in the first half. Now the Patriots have a week off to get ready for their divisional showdown against either the Texans, Ravens, or Chargers on Sunday, January 13th at 1 p.m. Here to discuss it all is one of the truly unique people on the Patriots beat. His name is Will Bendetson. He covers the Patriots for the Sports Exchange. You can follow him on Twitter at Patriots Maven, all one word, or online at the website footballmaven.io/Patriots. How are you, Will?
Trags, I'm on with you, so I'm good. And what better way to ring in the new year than to be on with legend of the Boston sports media market, Mike Petraglia.
You know what, Will? I think you're too kind and you're overstating it, but you know what? I'll accept the compliment nevertheless.
Well, if you can't accept praise on the, at the beginning of the new year, then when else are you going to be able to accept praise?
You know what? That is a very, that's a very good point, and I think very appropriate given us entering the new year together. How would you characterize your enthusiasm for covering football?
I really enjoy football. I think it's, the best game there is, and that's no knock on the other sports. I think it's more a compliment to football than it is a knock on basketball or baseball. I'm not quite as into hockey as those other two I just mentioned. But, I think the great thing about football is it's once a week, so you can really get into the game, really explore the matchups. Like last week they're playing the Jets. You had a week to explore that. Obviously the Jets and the Bills weren't the most exciting opponent, but, when they play a team like Pittsburgh, as they did a couple of weeks ago, it's really fun, or Minnesota or Green Bay or Kansas City, some of the other big games they've had this year. I enjoy it. I enjoy breaking down the matchups, and, when you really know the team, it makes it fun, and you study the other team, it makes it fun. So I enjoy football a lot. I guess maybe sometimes the only knock is you wish there were more games because it's once a week, and so you really get up for that game. But, overall, I really enjoy it.
When you walk into a room, everybody knows Will Bendetson is in the room because you come up to people and you engage them. Mostly beat reporters, of course, at the Gillette Stadium media room during the week, and of course in the press box during the game, before, during, and after the games. Why do you like people so much? Because maybe I'm overstating this, but you love being around people.
No, I think that's fair. I think I like this. It's actually funny since I came back to the beat, between the beat and going to law school and coming back. This beat has been a really fun group. It's been young and it's been vibrant, and, they give me a hard time, and, in a good way, and I give it back. And, I think it's a beat. The reason I think overall it's such a great beat is no one takes themselves too seriously. So you can poke fun at people. We all have our imperfections. We all have our little weird quirks. And when you can poke fun at people and they can poke fun at me and they know that no one's going to take it personally, I think it makes for a good atmosphere. And, down there, as Trags, we have a lot of time when we wait.
That's for
Especially
sure.
Now it's not like it used to be when Belichick usually goes in the morning and the locker room's late afternoon. So you have a lot of time to wait, and it makes it easier to pass the time if it's a good group that you like. And the other thing I've been impressed with on the beat, on a serious thing, is, the last time I covered the team, we didn't even have Game Pass. So you couldn't really rewatch the games and you couldn't see the coaches' film. Now you can see the coaches' film, so it's much more, you can really watch players in depthly, and you feel like you're giving them a more fair analysis. And this group, I think, is really dedicated to watching the film and, really grading players accurately and into statistics. So I think fans are lucky. I've really never seen such dedication on the beat as I've seen on this one.
I think that's actually a great point, Will, because, since you brought it up, people might not know this, but you went back to school after the 2011 season. That's right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you went to law school at Tulane. You came back to cover the NFL. Why did you want to come back?
Well, the opportunity just sort of came up through some happenstance. I think one of the things I didn't realize at the time, but I liked NFL more, is that, there's a game once a week, unlike the law, where cases can drag on forever and there are continuances, which means, an extension of, it's supposed to be on this date, but, one lawyer from one side wants an extension to another date to do more depositions and all that. And so, there is that football. It's going to happen, the game on Sunday. I really like that. Also, the excitement of the game and that it beats sitting in an office all day, which is mostly what law is, doing paperwork. So, and the third thing I would say is I think the personalities are really interesting. I think I've always been interested in the players. I think, one of the myths is to get to this level, I don't care how talented you are, you have to work really hard and you have to go through some self-examination from some sort of psychological point of view, really understand yourself, how you fit in the team concept. So I think the personalities are really interesting. I think this locker room is no different. Guys like Devin McCourty and even Trey Flowers. And, there are many interesting personalities to talk to. So I enjoy the players. I think it's a good group. I think it's a team sport. So, you can't be too selfish and play the sport at a high level.
Okay, besides the personality, Will, and speaking with Will Bendetson covering the Patriots for the Sports Exchange, you can follow him on Twitter at PatriotsMaven. What do you like the most about this particular Patriots football team, just beyond the good personalities that are in the locker room?
I think their willingness to get better. I think that they, take a guy like Kyle Van Noy, he just seems to keep improving. And I think he's become a pretty good linebacker in this league. I know Jeff Howe had it in his film review today, and I have the same thing. I think Van Noy, that they work. I don't think that there's not a lot of household names on this team. They only had 2 Pro Bowlers, Brady and Gilmore. I think that there was a good case for James White. I know I love James White, but yeah, you take a guy like White. He's just, I think he was a 3rd or 4th round pick, and he's, nobody thought much of him. People thought it was a mistake when they beat Seattle in the Super Bowl. He wasn't even, I think, active that game in the Seattle Super Bowl. And, 2 years later, he's in the Atlanta Super Bowl, and I think he had, I don't remember the exact number, but he has the winning touchdown run, and he had 10 catches or 14 catches, and, they couldn't stop him, and they don't win that Super Bowl without him. So their willingness for these guys to work and just continue to get better, I think, is impressive. They're not really seem to seek out the headlines or even Trey Flowers, who's going to make a good amount of money in the off season. He's really not that interested in the headlines or the fame or anything like that. I think he's interested in being a really good football player.
So I'm glad you brought up Trey Flowers because I think he is a Pro Bowl caliber player. You ask Bill Belichick, and he will tell us all the time of the kind of consistent high level at which Trey Flowers plays, and he has gotten better in each of his 3 years in the NFL. And, to watch the way he's grown, or 4 years in the NFL, to watch the way he has grown as a football player, I don't think he gets talked about enough nationally.
Yeah, I think certainly he should be mentioned more. Trey Flowers is always a fun topic because there's no topic that threatens to divide the beat more than Trey Flowers.
And why is that, Will?
Well, because I think for a couple of reasons. One, he finished the year with 7.5 sacks. I don't know what that is. It's around 35th to 40th in the league. And so obviously that's good. And the other reason, well, there are a couple of reasons. He's a free agent at the end of the year, so he's going into the off season. So it's a big question as to what he was worth. How much, we all like to play GM. How much is he worth? And so I think we have different interpretations on that. And so that's, I think that's why it's a debate. The other thing is that I think defensive football, whereas with statistics, you can easily, statistics are much better at measuring running backs and receivers than they are, defensive linemen or offensive linemen or even linebackers. So it's you really have to watch him closely to, I think, really get a sense of his value. You really have to chart. It also gets into, the Pro Football Focus now, how much they chart. The big new stat is quarterback pressures, how much you put stock in that. Not that nobody puts any stock, but, it's possible to have a pressure on a play and the quarterback still completes a pass. So how you do that and, how much you put into his improvement in the run game. So I think there's different factors that lead people to have different conclusions about him.
I happen to feel that the Patriots should re-sign him. And I think he is.
Well, I think everybody thinks that they should re-sign him. It's just a question of look, he's clearly their best defensive lineman. I don't think anybody would argue that. It's just a question of price. I'm more that he's worth $10 million a year. I know Jeff Howe had a piece more that he thinks he's worth $14 million a year. So it's just a question of what level. Also, is he a system guy, which I'm never really sure what it means, but is he a guy that, is he a guy that will succeed more in the Patriots system than somewhere else? I think that is possible. And so that's the question. How much, will he get on the open market? But I do agree with you, Trags. I think it's important, if they can, to try to re-sign him before he gets to the open market in March when free agency starts, because then the money could get crazy. And so I think it would be nice if they found a way in the playoffs. All of a sudden, one day you heard reach an extension with Trey Flowers. I think that would be great news for Patriots fans.
Why has Adrian Claiborne not been the player that I think a lot of people thought he would be on the edge?
I think with Claiborne, first of all, I think he had 9 sacks last year, but 6 came in a game against the Cowboys where he was going up against a backup left tackle. So you take that game out of it, I think the stats were deceiving. I think weirdly he's rushed past the quarterback at times. He's been inactive the last 2 games. He was always brought in to be a situational pass rusher, which I think is weird in their system where they're more on edge guys to stop the run, and then they bring in Claiborne. And I don't know. I think he's slowed down. I just haven't found him to be that good. It's not a knock on him. I just don't think he has a lot of moves, and I don't, there's a couple times he could make a play if he and Trey Flowers were on the same side and he was a stunt. There's a big play in the Green Bay game, but yeah, I just think he's slowing down. I'm not sure. I don't know how much interest he'll generate from other teams. He has a year left on his contract. I don't expect him to be back. He's been a disappointment. I mean, he was paid, I think, $6 million a year. That's not that much for an edge rusher. So maybe in that sense he hasn't been. But I still think he's been a disappointment that they asked him to contribute. And, now it certainly looks, watching the film, like John Simon, who they brought in week 3, who was released at the end of training camp by the Colts, has surpassed him and I think is a better player. And I think I would rather have him active right now than Claiborne.
I know you asked about Adam Butler this week on a conference call with Bill on Monday, and from what I've seen of him, he's probably been one of the younger defensive players that has blossomed into a stalwart in that defensive front more than anybody else.
Yeah, he's been a good third down rusher. Mainly he's their third down pass rusher, and he's been good. At times he's been able to draw double teams, which has allowed Flowers to make some plays. And I think he's been good. It's an impressive story. He was an undrafted rookie last year, and the Patriots have had a lot of luck with undrafted players. David Andrews, the center, I think it was, David a couple of years ago. Last year, Butler. This year, J.C. Jackson. So Belichick has always found those undrafted rookies. Malcolm Butler, obviously. So, I mean, look, they've had luck. It seems like one a year they find that contributes. And I'm not sure really what goes into that. I think a lot more credit probably deserves Nick Caserio and his staff for really, finding diamonds in the rough. I remember a funny story one time being in the Patriots reception area for whatever reason the day after the draft. And I think every agent of a player who wasn't drafted was calling just to get him a workout, trying to get their guy a workout. I think it shows you they have to go through a lot of guys to find the one diamond in the rough, that can contribute in the undrafted pool. But I think it is dedication because, a lot of teams might look past that and the Patriots don't. And I think the result is it seems like one guy a year is really contributing who didn't get drafted.
Tell me why, and I know Patriot fans want an answer to this. Tell me why Patriot fans should be optimistic about this Patriots defense going into the playoffs. especially if Kansas City wins their divisional game and the Patriots would have to go to Kansas City and play an AFC championship game. Tell me why you would have confidence in this defense against Pat Mahomes.
I don't know that I do. I wrote that this week. I don't know if you saw my game call, but
right.
I said, they played well the last 2 weeks, but you have to consider their opponent. The Jets, they didn't have Quincy Enunwa, who they just gave an extension to, and Kearse didn't play. So 2 of their best 3 receivers, which basically meant they had nobody because Gilmore took away Robbie Anderson, who's their downfield threat. So I think, I don't know. I mean, the biggest reason to be optimistic about the Patriots defense is their secondary. I think their secondary has become pretty good. Obviously, Gilmore, the top corner. Jackson has become very good, reliable second corner, and he's learned how to be physical. Early in the year he was physical, but he was drawing a lot of penalties. He's not doing that anymore, so he's becoming smarter. If it's Jason McCourty as your third corner or Jonathan Jones, I think you'd like to see the safeties make a few more plays, McCourty and Harmon and Chung. But, yeah, I think the optimism comes from the secondary. If they can cover long enough, hopefully the pass rush can get there. They don't have, I think, a really good pass rusher. I think Flowers is, he's sort of what I think is a good 3 technique on the guard. But, yeah, I don't think they have a Khalil Mack or an edge guy, a true edge pass rusher like a Chandler Jones was. So, yeah, I think that's the concern. Can they get enough pass rush against against a good passing team? That's a concern. The other concern is, and maybe the last 2 weeks made me feel a little better, but only to extent, but the run defense was really bad against Miami and
really
Pittsburgh.
Bad, yeah.
They gave up close to really bad, 200 yards. They seem to have improved that, but we'll see when they're going up against a better opponent, better offensive line, if that holds. I know against Pittsburgh, some nickel. So, they were trying to play the pass more and concede the run, but when you let Jalen Samuels, their third running back, 160 yards, go all over you, that's not good. The other concern I still have about the defense is can they make a big play at a big time? I know certainly this was another disagreement among beat writers who thought that the defense was good against Pittsburgh. I didn't think it was as good because
I'm with
17 points and Boswell missed the field goal, but I think a telling drive was when Brady threw the interception to Hayden, and they had the ball, Pittsburgh, at their own 4.
Yep.
If the defense makes a play and holds them and forces them to punt out of their end zone, they get the ball at the 50 or the 40, Pittsburgh 40. Great field position. Instead, they give up 3 first downs, a 5-minute drive, and, ends up Boswell kicks a 47-yard field goal. But, that's the type of drive you would have liked to see the defense make a play. And that's why I think it's still important to watch the games, in the age of pro football focus and everything. I do think context matters. So, yeah, I'd like to, if the defense has to make a big stand in Kansas City, I still question, whether they can do that. That said, who knows? Kansas City could get upset in the second round by Baltimore, but it wouldn't shock me if Indianapolis went into Houston this week. I think that's the most likely upset because they already did it 3 weeks ago, won in Houston. Indianapolis playing super well after they started 1-5. I think they're 9-1 the last 10 games. So, and then if that happens, the Patriots will probably play Baltimore in the second round. So the other thing is that if Kansas City, who's really struggled in the playoffs recently, I think they've lost their last 5 home playoff games. They haven't won a home playoff game since '93. If they do get to the AFC Championship game, and they are playing the Patriots, I don't think that Kansas City's been to a Super Bowl since Super Bowl IV. So I think that's half that state will be shut down for that game. Their first chance to go to the Super Bowl, in a long, long time, since Super Bowl IV, 50 years almost. So it'll be an epic game, in the history of Missouri. You know what I mean, Trax?
Oh, there's no question, and I cannot wait, if that's the case, to cover a game there, because I've never covered a game there. Have you?
No, I have not been there. But I'm just saying, for the Patriots' standpoint, to go in there when it's Kansas City's, the ultimate game in Kansas City. I mean, that you wouldn't be a stretch to say that's the biggest game in Chiefs history if they get to the AFC Championship,
Well, I mean, it's not bigger than the Super Bowl.
No, but I mean, most of their fans' lifetime. They beat the Vikings in Super Bowl IV. So,
right.
I mean, that's around 1970, so that's almost 50 years ago. And so most of these fans weren't alive for that. I don't think, many of the fans remember that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, so, I hear your point there. That's fair. And certainly, to take on the big bad, New England Patriots would be comparable to the Chiefs taking on Vince Lombardi's Green Bay Packers in Super Bowl I, right? I mean, it'd be the same type of
it would be the same type of thing. I mean, I think they want the Patriots at Arrowhead for the AFC Championship game, you know? It's like Tony Dungy in 2006. Remember, they had lost. The Patriots had beaten the Colts 2003 and 2004 playoffs in Foxborough. And Tony Dungy admitted, you know what, if we're going to get to the Super Bowl and we're going to win it, we want to beat the Patriots. And I think it's the same with the Chiefs. They're not going to admit it now. They'll only admit it later. But I think they sort of feel that way, that they want to take out New England, you know. I mean, they're the big bad dynasty team, you know.
I think it would be, even for these Patriots, and I'm sure one of the huge storylines that week, if even the Patriots and Chiefs win their divisional round games, which I think they will, one of the big storylines will be the Patriots going on the road. There'll be a lot of analogies brought up with the Steeler games in 2001 and 2004. When the Patriots had to go through Heinz Field, which to me, Arrowhead is Arrowhead, but maybe a half a step below that in terms of great football atmospheres, that the Patriots would have to face on the road is Pittsburgh. We were both there in Pittsburgh 3 weeks ago, and I'm telling you, when that place gets rocking and the terrible towels get going, it is as intimidating as any place you'll see in the National Football League. And I think, that is the kind of thing that a lot of people will be writing about, that this Patriot team will not be afraid of, the noise and the karma that the Chiefs will have on their side, trying to get to a Super Bowl for the first time in 50 years.
I think too. I mean, in Pittsburgh, people are on the Patriots about the penalties, but if you look even at the last Mason penalty, the holding penalties, was sometimes the defensive line, Pittsburgh's outplayed the Patriots' offensive line. So you get beat, you hold, hope you get away with it. The false starts, I think, had to do with the crowd noise and the offensive line being nervous. Pittsburgh came into that game leading the league in sacks, so they had a very good pass rush. I agree. I mean, the Chiefs, under Marty, they always disappointed in the playoffs. It's kind of been the same with Andy Reid. Last year they lost at home. But I don't know that they've had a home AFC championship game, in a long time. So I know when they lost to the Bills with Montana, that was in Buffalo. So
right.
It hasn't been a long time since they've had a home AFC championship game. They had a couple number one seeds where they lost to Denver in the divisional round. But yeah, I think this would be as huge a game, so they'd have to really be mentally tough and play their best game, because that stadium will be rocking. I mean, it will be some atmosphere, those fans are intense. So it would be a heck of a game,
Speaking
they'd have to play better than they did earlier in that they, one of the concerns on the road this year was they got down early in some of the road games, and they can't do that in Kansas City. I think one of the things that was so important in the 2001 AFC Championship game against the Steelers and the 2004 AFC Championship game was they started fast. You remember in 2004, the long pass to Deion Branch, or the end around. They had a big play that led to a touchdown early. That kind of took the crowd out of the game. So I think that's important, that they started fast in those games. And I think they'd have to do the same thing in Kansas City.
They started fast in Indianapolis in 2006, right? They did.
They did, yeah.
And then completely fell off the wagon, and they
the thing though that's
ran out of
about that game is
go ahead.
Game is that they started fast, and then Indianapolis tied it at 21-3 at halftime after the Asante Samuel interception. Then they tied it Indianapolis at 21. Then it was a seesaw affair, Patriots led 28-21, and the Colts tied it at 20. It wasn't like the Patriots completely collapsed in the second half, I mean, they put up a fight, and if it was 3rd and 2 to go to the Super Bowl, and Brady, if he completes a pass to Troy Brown, and Bob Sanders has robber coverage, and he comes at the last minute and knocks it away and forces the Patriots to punt. But everyone forgets they were 1 first down away from going to that Super Bowl, and they obviously would have beaten the Bears with Rex Grossman that year. So, yeah.
Speaking with Will Bendetson, covering the Patriots for the Sports Exchange. You can follow him on Twitter at PatriotsMaven, or on the website footballmaven.io/Patriots. All right. What is your take on Tom Brady, and at what level do you think he is playing?
I was just never as down on him. I mean, I think in the Pittsburgh game, if Mason doesn't hold to it at the end, I think they score. And because I thought he was really good on that drive until that holding penalty, then it all collapsed. And then he scores, and everyone says it's a Brady-esque drive. You know, the Hayden interception in that game, I thought he had a couple guys in his face. I think he was trying to throw it out of bounds. I just don't think he has the arm strength that he once did. And, you know, it's interesting. Gene Upshaw once said that he, when asked about whether he was slipping, he said, yeah, I'm slipping, but from a high place. So, yeah, Brady is slipping. There's no question. He's not the quarterback that he was in 2007 or 2010. We both covered that season when he had, I think, maybe his best season, actually. Yep. He had only 2 interceptions that year. He won the MVP. But, yeah, he's slipping, but from a high place. So I still think he's one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the league. And, you know, I mean, going into the playoffs, the AFC, I mean, what quarterback of the 6 teams would you rather have right now than Brady? I mean, maybe Luck, you know, maybe he's playing at a higher, you know, Deshaun Watson, we'll see. You know, Mahomes, some of these younger guys, you'd still rather have him than Rivers, I think. So, yeah, I think, you know, in the big game, you still trust him. And, you know, he's 3-4 in road playoff games, and that's, you know, but that's most quarterbacks. That means, you know, you're not going to generally play well in road playoff games because you're playing a better team. And so, I mean, and 3 of those losses were in Denver. So, yeah, I still think he's very good. I don't think he's quite what he was, but I think fans around here don't realize, you know, how much most teams struggle to find a good quarterback. You know, you take a situation like Denver where they've had a very good defense, good running game, and the reason they're not in the playoffs is, you know, that they can't find a quarterback. They took Paxton Lynch in the first round after Peyton Manning retired. They had to release him at the end of training camp. You know, he was a bust, and now, you know, they signed Case Keenum, give him a lot of money, and let's face it, Case Keenum is just a jag. He's just another quarterback, and, you know, he's not bad, but he's not good. So, you know, it's tough to find a quarterback. There aren't that many really good ones, maybe 5 or 6 in the league. You know, Brady, Mahomes, Breeze, you know, Russell Wilson, Andrew Luck, but there aren't that many of them. So it's tough to find. And, you know, you look in the NFC, there's just not in the playoffs. I mean, Foles is playing well, but, you know, Trubisky and, you know, Jared Goff and, you know, there's not that many elite, you know, guys. We'll see about Dak Prescott. But I think, yeah, you know, Brady, I think the reason they have a chance to go far is Brady still.
What about Rob Gronkowski and your concern level for his inability to create separation? Do you see it, and do you see it as a concern in the playoffs? Because I do.
I agree. I think he finished the year, I think, with 47 catches. He had, ironically, his best game was in Miami, but nobody remembers because of the last play. But he had 8 catches for 107 yards. But they played a lot of zone that game, and so he got open. But, yeah, I think he's to the point now where his speed is down. You can single cover him. You know, he's just not that. I know a long play was taken away from him this week. But, yeah, I mean, there is a theory. I threw it out on Twitter that Gronk, you know, could be saving it up for the playoffs. One last run, you know, 3 games. Even if he had 2 really good games, it would help them. I don't know. I don't see it. I know if you're game planning against the Patriots offense at this point, your first priority is take away Edelman. I know if I was a defensive coordinator,
I agree.
I would first take away Edelman, you know, see if Dorsett can beat you, you know, and if I'm big up front, I could take away the running game. That's why I think the Ravens will be tough, because if they do play them, you know, I think they'll take away Edelman, they'll rush the passer, they'll take away the Patriots running game, and, you know, they'll sort of force them to win with Dorsett or Hogan or Gronk. And, you know, I'm not sure that they can do that right now. So, yeah, Gronk is no question concerned. I thought in training camp he had 2 more years left in him. Now I think this could be it. I mean, I don't think he's committed to playing next year. I think it's obvious that he retired. You know, he thought about retirement last year. And, you know, he said when his body doesn't feel good, football isn't fun. And he's taken a lot of hits. He had the back issue coming into the league. He only played 1 year of college football because he missed the second year with back surgery. So he, you know, that's why he fell in the second round. But, yeah, he's got nothing to be ashamed of. I think he's had a very good career, you know, but, yeah, he's faced some injuries. And so, yeah, I mean, I think to win the Super Bowl or get to the Super Bowl, they're going to need Gronk to, you know, play well and better than he's playing.
I mean, Gronk's a Hall of Famer, right? I mean, there's no question that if he retires after this year, he is going into the Hall of Fame, right?
I would vote for him, yeah. You know, Ron Borges, a good friend of mine, a Patriots voter. I don't know his thoughts on it. I think Ron does a good job of, putting things in perspective because he's watched a lot of football in 40 years. But in my lifetime, I think he's the best, one of the best tight ends I've seen. I think Shannon Sharp, Ben Coates, Shannon is in, Coates is obviously not, but yeah, I think they're right up there just off the top of my head. Gronk was a guy you had to double team, you had to take away. And I think if you go back to the Seattle Super Bowl, they couldn't single cover him, and the linebacker couldn't cover him because the linebacker isn't fast enough and the defensive back wasn't big enough. So certainly on production, I would vote for him, and also good in the blocking game. And I think he's a Hall of Famer. I would vote for him.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's interesting.
Go ahead.
It's interesting because there aren't that many tight ends in the Hall of Fame. Right now, I think there's only 7 or 8 tight ends in NFL history in the Hall of Fame. And obviously there's going to be 9 with Tony Gonzalez this year. But
sure.
I just think, there's not that many. So for whatever reason, that position hasn't seemed to be rewarded as maybe some other positions. But also I think, to call him just a tight end is a little maybe disingenuous because what he is a pass catcher. He's been more of a receiver than a traditional, blocking tight end in his career.
Speaking with Will Bendetson, Patriots beat writer for the Sports Exchange. You can follow him on Twitter at PatriotsMaven or online at the website footballmaven.io/Patriots. We're going to finish up here, Will, talking about one of my very favorite football books, and I don't say this just because you wrote it, but the 2010 book.
You're too kind.
Your 2010 book on Bill Parcells and the 1990 Super Bowl champion Giants with defensive lineman Leonard Marshall. Bill Parcells, the 1990 New York Giants and the Price of Greatness, When the Cheering Stops. What was the inspiration of When the Cheering Stops?
It was actually a total coincidence at the start. As I think a lot of books are, I was interning at ESPN in college. It was the summer. We weren't doing much. And I was writing Where Are They Now pieces, which means what happens to old players. And, Leonard, came up because Leonard's most famous play is the hit that knocked out Montana in the 1990 NFC Championship game. Essentially ended Montana's career in San Francisco. He was on the roster the next 2 years, but only played one more game. Steve Young really became the Niners' full-time quarterback in 1991. So, I thought it'd be cool that hit. And, Leonard had told me about a lot of issues with retired players. Originally, we were just going to do a book about the challenges of retired players, from divorce to financial struggles to, head injuries, which became bigger later. But, and then I think I sort of came up with the idea that the publishers thought that might be a little depressing. So it was coming up on the 20-year anniversary of the 90 Super Bowl between the Giants and the Bills when Norwood had the kick wide right.
Right.
And, so thought it'd be cool to do an anniversary book and then intersperse the stories, what happened to a few guys like, some good, some bad, Mark Ingram, Dave Meggett, they had their struggles, and other uplifting stories like Everson Walls. So a lot of interesting guys on that team. And it was I learned a lot of football writing a book. Surprised there wasn't a little more interest around here because, Belichick was the defensive coordinator on that team, and he, masterminded the game plan that beat the Bills, sort of conceding the run, like they did against the Rams, and then, putting 7 or 8 defensive backs, beating up the running back in the passing game. So in that game, they beat up Thurman Thomas in the passing game, and 2001 they beat up Marshall Faulk. So you saw some game plan similarities. He sent his game plan to Canton, Ohio, so I went out to see it. His game plan, that was interesting with Leonard, and got to talk to a lot of interesting guys, watch a lot of football, learned a lot about Belichick, his theories, the way he comes. That was another reason I was interested in it because, obviously Belichick being the defensive coordinator was so heavily involved in those teams. So that was interesting. And then, getting to interview Parcells, who ended up writing the foreword for 2 long interviews, talking to him for 3 or 4 hours. I think I learned more in that than, in years that have gone by. So it's really, I learned a lot, and I enjoyed the writing process. The only thing I didn't enjoy was, the business side of the book business, but, everything was good, and, it was intense research, but, I tried to really take fans back to that season. I think most people enjoyed it. It's still available on Amazon.
I'm glad you bring that up because I think there's a lot from that book and a lot from that team that still exists in the National Football League today. In terms of attitude, we hear so much about how the game has evolved, and how it's a much different type of game, and cracking down on really hard hits and whatnot, and football safety in general. But there's still a lot about the theoretical and intellectual side of football that I think comes from a team like the Giants, who really had to figure out, and Belichick had to figure out a way to beat one of the most innovative offenses in Jim Kelly's Red K gun offense in that Super Bowl.
Yeah, there's no question. The other thing that Super Bowl took place during the first Gulf War, so it was a very patriotic Super Bowl in terms of fans remembering. And yeah, I think if fans went back and watched those games, they might be bored because the Giants the Giants played the Niners that year on Monday Night Football in early December. They lost 7-3 in San Francisco. Then there was a rematch in the NFC Championship game, and you'll remember the Niners had won the previous 2 Super Bowls, and they were the first team it was thought was going to three-peat. And no team has actually ever won 3 Super Bowls in a row, still to this day. But the Niners, I think, were the closest. They had the Giants at home in the NFC Championship game. In fact, the Tampa, they were the late game. Buffalo had beaten Oakland 51-3. When they got to Tampa, there were a lot of signs, Bills 49ers Super Bowl, which never happened. Everyone thought at some point in the 90s there would have been a Bills 49ers Super Bowl, but it didn't happen. But yeah, and that game was 15-13. So there wasn't nearly the Giants won. There wasn't nearly the offense that there was today. And then don't forget the Niners had Joe Montana, and he only had 1 touchdown pass in that game. The Giants had no touchdowns. They had 5 field goals. And after Leonard knocked out Montana, Steve Young had the ball, and they needed 1 first down to get to Tampa. And Eric Howard caused a fumble that Lawrence Taylor recovered. And the other interesting story was that Phil Simms got hurt late in the season. So Jeff Hostetler, their backup, was their quarterback, and he led them on the drive to set up the game-winning field goal that Matt Barr kicked, who later came to the Patriots. And they also had a safety on that team, Myron Guyton, who came to the Patriots, and Bob Cratch. So there was and the Patriots connections were heavy because Romeo Crennel was, I think, the special teams coach, and Al Gray was on that staff. So there's a lot of guys. Ron Earhart was the offensive coordinator. So, Bill Parcells obviously came to the Patriots. That was his last year with the Giants. So it's interesting. And, I didn't know there's become more interest in those sort of Giants teams now. Like last year before the Super Bowl, you'll remember the 2 Bills documentary. So having written the book, that had really interested me, some of the stories, because I never thought I would see Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick sit down together.
Could you sense that when you were writing the book, when you went back and did the research, that these two, while they had a great deal of respect for one another, there was animosity is a strong word, and it may not be the right word, but could you tell there was tension?
I think so. There was a story in the documentary. I had known that Belichick's nickname was Doom because he was always sort of negative on things when he was with the Giants. And, there was a story in the documentary that Parcells would walk by. They really only had 3 defensive coaches. There was Romeo. Romeo started as special teams. Maybe by that point he was defensive line. Al Groh and Belichick. Belichick was also the defensive backs coach. They had wanted earlier, actually, Tony Dungy to come be the defensive backs coach, but he didn't want to move his family from Kansas City. So Dungy, went back to Kansas City. And Belichick, was the defensive backs coach. So it was a small staff, and Parcells would walk by the office and think, what have you geniuses cooked up this week? So I think Parcells was a little, sort of putting the needle in, because I think Parcells was always a little skeptical of Belichick. He would always have some, we'll say, for lack of a better word, creative ideas. And sometimes Bill would do them. Sometimes Bill wouldn't do them and give him a look like, this is effed up. And Belichick goes, well, how do you want me to do it? And Parcells says, well, I don't know, but what I'm telling you, what you're doing is effed up. So, yeah, I think there was some, but no, I don't think there was that much tension with the major tension that developed between Parcells and Belichick came later in the 90s when they were with the Jets. When they were with the Giants, I think it was a pretty good relationship. I'm not saying They didn't argue here and there. Of course they did. But I think it was overall a good relationship. And, and at that point, Belichick was still a little more intimidated by Parcells because he hadn't been a head coach yet. He wasn't quite as big of a name. Parcells appreciated Belichick's loyalty. After the 83 season, Parcells, it's interesting now when you see the coaching changes. Steve Wilkes getting fired after 3-13 season because Bill Parcells' first year in 83, he went 3-12-1. The Giants thought about firing him. They wanted to hire Howard Schnellenberger from Miami, and they couldn't get him for some reason. So reluctantly, they gave him another chance in 84, and that's when they had their first playoff season. But, and Belichick in that 83 off season was offered to go to the Vikings, a job with the Vikings, and he at the last minute turned it down to come back to the Giants. Out of his loyalty to Parcells, Parcells had brought him there. So I think they felt pretty loyal to each other, and Parcells appreciated his work ethic. I don't think there was tremendous tension with the Giants. I really think that came later with the Jets. Parcells wanting Belichick to be the head coach, then Belichick, backing out. Was named head coach and then backed out at the last minute for a variety of reasons. One, to get out of the shadow of Parcells. Two, he didn't really like Woody Johnson. So there was several factors. But I think in the Giants, they worked pretty well together.
How can people follow you, Will?
Oh, just on Twitter, Patriots Maven.
That's the best way.
As you said, footballmaven.io/Patriots. I put, if you go to footballmaven.io, you can just click Patriots link, but you can just click /Patriots, and then on Twitter. And I think I also have a Facebook page, but those are the two easiest ways. I put all the links to my articles on Twitter, so it's very easy. I put, my link. I do a podcast every Wednesday. And so I put the link there. It's on SoundCloud. I put the link. I try to make it very easy. Everything's sort of on Twitter. That's sort of the center of my universe. So, I do my videos, which generally are with my stories. You can click on them, but occasionally I'll put a video on Twitter. So, just Twitter, Patriots Maven, have about 4,000 followers. So, it's growing. And, that's the easiest way.
Will, this is the first time you've been on Patriots Beat. It will not be the last. I can assure you that. This has been a lot of fun.
I really enjoyed it, Trags. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you don't say, oh, God, Will was a terrible guest. It's the worst decision of my life, just like being friends with Trags, Trags has a high standard to be his friend. He doesn't just let anybody be his friend.
This is true. I try to be selective. I think there's good cause for that in life, to be selective, because I think...
I should learn that.
No, I think you're selective enough, Will. I would not criticize you in that regard. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, I want to thank everybody for downloading today's podcast. I want to thank our terrific guest, Will Bendetson, outstanding writer covering the Patriots for the Sports Exchange at footballmaven.io. And once again, as he mentioned, available on Amazon. You can get When This Cheering Stops. It's a book. Will, help me out here. It's from Triumph Publishing.
2010 Triumph Books, and you can either buy the hardcover on Amazon, and we're very high tech Tracks. It's available on Kindle too. So if you don't like to, lug around a book, then you can read it on your tablet. So it's easy either way. It is
a great football read. When the Cheering Stops, the 2010 book on Bill Parcells and the 1990 Super Bowl champion Giants with defensive lineman Leonard Marshall. Bill Parcells, the 90 Giants, and the price of greatness. I want to thank...
Right, if I have one wish on my deathbed, it's not to talk to my wife or anything. It's talk football with you. What a way to go out.
Oh, my God.
That, right?
That is, that's over the top, but incredibly gracious, and I appreciate that, Will. For producer Michael Longji, for the founder of the network, Nick Gelso, this is Mike Petralia, and this has been the Patriots Beat podcast, powered by CLNS Media.
Hello, I'm Dan Lothian, host of the Behind the Media podcast on the CLNS Media Network. Along with Jimmy Young, we dive into the biggest media headlines each week with honest, informed, and sometimes irreverent perspectives. It's not all serious. We deliver information and entertainment. As we like to say on Behind the Media, we find the interesting in media so you don't have to go searching for it. Listen to our podcast and get prepped for the next trip to the water cooler. Subscribe to Behind the Media wherever you get your podcast, or find us on www.clnsmedia.com.